In this video, we'll learn about different designs for research studies. We'll start off learning about the between subjects design. But first, let's discuss and remind ourselves the goal of the experimental research strategy. Now remember, with experimental research, we can determine a cause and effect relationship between two variables, that independent variable will cause an effect in that dependent variable. That's what we're hypothesizing, and depending on our results, we can determine if there is a cause and effect relationship. Now remember, we had specific requirements, okay? So one was that we have to manipulate at least one variable. We have to measure a second variable. We then compare the scores between different treatments. And we want to control all other variables, and we use random assignment as one of those ways to control those variables. Now we'll talk more about how we compare the scores between treatments, the different types of designs as I mentioned throughout this module, how we might control for other variables. One thing we've talked about is random assignment, but there are other ways as well. And it's important to remember that this manipulation of the variable, do we remember that's the independent or dependent variable? It is that independent variable, the IV. So that means that the variable that we're going to measure is going to be our dependent variable. What we're going to use to compare the scores between the treatments is going to be those statistics that we're kind of slowly reviewing and going over. So there's two basic designs of research. And the first is going to be a between subjects or an independent measures design. So sometimes it's called between subjects, sometimes you'll see it called an independent measure. So here you have data from two completely or independent participant groups, and that's why it's called sometimes an independent measures design. We'll be calling it most of the time this between subjects design, but keep in mind that it's the two groups that are involved are independent of each other. The measurements that you do for an experiment with a between subjects design are independent of each other. So here's just an example. So you have one group of participants and you have another group of participants, and they're going to get different conditions. Maybe one is a control group and one gets your experimental treatment, and then you compare those scores using certain kinds of statistics. Now this is different than a within subjects or repeated measures design. So we'll use this term within subjects mostly, but repeated measures means that again you have data from the same or related participant groups. So you have one group of individuals and they're measured multiple times or repeatedly. And this repeated measures idea, this is important when we talk about the different statistics that are involved, this idea between repeated measures and independent measures. So here's an example. So here we have one group of individuals, we have one set of participants, and we collect data before and we collect data after. Now this is just one type of within subjects design. An alternative might be that we have one sample and they're measured at time 1, time 2, and time 3, or condition 1, condition 2, and maybe even a condition 3. So the idea is we're repeating these measurements. Here we're repeating these measurements. So it's within subjects or repeated measures design. And here's just a diagram from the text. Again, you have your sample participants from the population. So say this is our population and we've selected those participants. We've discussed how we do that to get a representative sample. And then those participants are going to be assigned to different treatment conditions. Now, because we are taking the sample and we're assigning them to one of 3 independent groups, this is a between subjects design. We have treatment condition 1, treatment condition 2, and treatment condition 3. Separate treatment conditions. So the research is going to manipulate the independent variable and then measure the dependent variable for each participant. And the goal is to determine whether differences exist between 2 or more of these treatment conditions. So the requirement is that you only have one score for each participant. Now, of course, if you had multiple dependent variables, you might have more than one score. But the idea is that you're comparing, for one dependent variable, you're going to compare the scores across the groups, and you get one score for each participant. And separate groups are used for the different treatment conditions. This is a between subjects design. So now before we go on any further, I just want to make sure that we really have a good solid foundation of what the differences are. And we'll come back in a later video and dive more into within subjects design, but just hopefully you have a basic understanding and can recognize an example of the different designs. In this example, a researcher randomly assigns a group of 47 English speakers to receive a new Spanish language program and 48 other English speakers to receive the standard Spanish language program, and then measures how well they'll do on a Spanish language test. So let's think here. Is this a between subjects or within subjects? Are the measurements going to be independent or repeated? So we take our sample, we randomly assign the individuals 47 English speakers to a Spanish language program, and then 48 other individuals to a different language program. And then we measure how well they'll do. Sounds like we're going to get one measurement for each person in the study. These measures will be after a new language program is used. These measures will be after a standard language program is used. So do you think it's between subjects or within subjects? It is a between subjects, right? We have, this is our individuals getting the new language program. This is the individuals getting the standard language program. It's not one sample doing both the new and the standard program. We're not collecting data before having them do a new language program and then collecting data after. So it's a between subjects design. How about this example? A researcher tests the reaction time of each measure of a group of 14 individuals twice, once while in a very hot room and once while in a normal temperature room. So we have 14 individuals in our sample, and they're going to be measured twice. So that sounds like a repeated measure. So is that between subjects or within subjects? Let's think. Do we have two different samples of individuals? Or do we have one sample that's measured in a hot room and a normal temperature room? Sounds kind of like this. Without a time 3, that means we have a within subjects design.